My friends, welcome back. 138 MMA here, and I'm going to break down Bellator 293 in its entirety. But a couple of things real quick. This is a tricky card. There's a lot of fights on this card that, well, first off, there's a lot of fights on this card. There's a lot of fights on this card that are very close, and there's a lot of fights on this card that you don't have much to go on. I'm pretty sure there's a 3-0 versus a 1-0. There's a 1-0 versus an 0-0. There's a lot of tough ones to pick, but I'm going to go ahead and do my darndest, give you the best information that I can based on my tape study, and give you my picks, my predictions for every single fight on this card. So that's what we're going to do. Real quick, you can find me on Twitter, 138MMA. You can find me on Tapology to find all my pick percentages and all that good stuff. 138MMA is there as well. This card's probably going to ruin my pick percentages, but that's okay. We're going to do it anyway. There's a couple of good spots on here. And then lastly, hey, to my patrons over on patreon.com/138MMA, I appreciate the heck out of you. There are 2 of you at the family or the friend level or above. Nobody's at family yet. That's a pretty big one. But 2 of you at the friend level or above, you will be on the next slide. So good for you, but there are 3 patrons over there now. We're growing. We're getting there. If you'd like to join Patreon, help to grow this channel, help this channel keep on chugging along. Eventually, I'd love to add PFL. I'd love to add LFA, Invicta, all those things. We need to grow. So if you'd like to support it, head on over to patreon.com/138MMA and do so. The link will also be in the description of this video. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get into these fights because I'm looking forward to breaking these down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, 138 MMA proudly brings to you the hottest picks in the world!
To kick off the card, we have Mackenzie Stiller in the strawweight division taking on Maria Henderson. Now, this is a tough one to break down, obviously, because we have an 0-0 taking on a 1-0. Now, Bellator does some of this stuff sometimes. They claim to be the best promotion in the world. They claim at least number 2, right? But then they do stuff like this where you got a 1-0 and an 0-0. I don't know. I don't blame these ladies for taking the spot. I would take the opportunity too if I was them, but it's just Bellator does some strange things sometimes, and this is what you get. So, from what I could find, Stiller has 4 amateur fights. This is her pro debut. She's 4-0 in the amateurs. Henderson is 1-0 in the pros. I don't think she had any amateur fights. I could be wrong. I don't think she did. There's just not much to go off of here. They both seem to be pretty good at jiu-jitsu. I don't know what to go off of here. I'm going to lean Henderson for the simple fact that she's Benson Henderson's wife, so you'd assume she's got, just being around a very high-level fighter all the time might help. I don't know. I really don't have anything to go off of, guys. There's no confidence in this. Don't put her in your parlays. Please don't put either of these ladies in your parlays. This is a tough one to pick, but yeah, I guess that's where we're going. Let me know what you guys think. Let's go to the fights that we can actually break down. I'm not quite sure what Bellator is doing. We have a bantamweight matchup here between Brendan Carrillo, I think is how you say that, and Bryce Meredith. This is one of those matchups where you don't have much to go off of. I don't really know what Bellator is looking for here. I did get the opportunity to see the odds a little bit right before they came out like right before I started recording this fight anyway. Some of these are already recorded before the odds. Anyway, before I started recording this fight, and I believe Meredith was like minus 1,500 favorite. What are you going off of? Who's making these up? Like, what are they going off of? I don't know. Anyway, let's break down this fight as much as we can, okay? So for Meredith, we have a bit better sample size. He does have 3 fights. He showed pretty good cardio, pretty good forward pressure. The wrestling seems to be there. He does have a wrestling background as well, and he seems to be a back taker from the 3 fights that I was able to see. On the other side, he's had 1 fight, and it was against a guy who is currently, I looked at his current record because at the time the guy hadn't fought. I looked at his current record. He's currently 0-5. So the guy that he beat has not beat anybody and just keeps getting beat pretty easily. He did look good doing it. So there's that. But like, what are you going off of here? For the sake of making a pick, I'm going to take Meredith. I'm not confident in this whatsoever. Not at all. Normally I make you go to the Patreon to see my confidence in picks, but guys, please do not throw this dude in your parlays. Yeah, he might make it look really easy, and it might be great, but he's like minus 1,500. And we all saw what happened with Pat Downey the other day, I guess like a few months ago. It can happen. And if for a guy that's 3-0 against a guy that's 1-0 and looked good in that 1 win against somebody that isn't that good, this guy could be awesome, and we just don't know it, is what I'm saying. And we don't have enough to go off for Meredith here to be that confident in him. Don't put him in your parlays, guys. Please don't put him in your parlay. In fact, check out the Patreon parlay. You can find it at patreon.com/138MMA. And I'm going to have a Patreon parlay out. It's going to contain this, and it might even contain a little bit of PFL. So something I don't even normally break down for you guys. But that's where I'm at. Leaning Meredith, but not based off anything other than I guess. So let me know what you got. We'll see you in the catchweight matchup here at 120 pounds. We have Ashley Smashley Cummins taking on Randi Field. For Cummins, she's fought a pretty good level of competition. So her 2-3 in her last 5. A lot of that is kind of the level of competition she's fought. She's very much the step before moving up. And she also usually fights at atomweight, so be that as it may, she usually is that step before you move up to that next level. She's been in pretty much everywhere. She's been around the regional scene. She's done it well. But if you're gonna move up, if you're gonna go to the next level, a win over Cummins here is a big way to do it. Now she finds herself here in Bellator taking on Randi Field. But it's at the wrong weight class. Like I said, she usually fights at atomweight, which is 105 pounds for anybody that doesn't know. This is at 120 pounds. Now, Cummins has fought at strawweight before in the past, but it's been a while. She's been in atomweight for a bit now. And here's the thing. She's usually a very physically strong competitor. But the asterisk here says because she's physically strong, because she's usually at atomweight, so will that match up against someone who's naturally going to be the bigger girl than her? So, obviously, Field should be much larger in this matchup, so I think that might even these two things out. Let's go ahead and mark that for y'all right there. These two should be pretty even now, simply due to the size of Field. Now, for Cummins, she's above average everywhere. She doesn't have anywhere that she's poor or bad or at all. Some places she's better than others, and she does hit pretty hard, so there is that. But she's just above average everywhere is I'm going to put it. Okay. On the other side, we got Field. Decent striking, decent grappling. We don't really have a big sample size. Obviously, only 4 professional fights, 3-1, obviously. We see that up on the board. This matchup, I think, is just going to come down to the fact that Randi Field is going to be a much bigger girl here, and I do think she's going to be able to get it done with her size. It's going to be hard for Cummins to be able to stay on top on the ground because Field's just that much bigger. It's going to be hard for Cummins to be able to get out from the bottom when she's on the ground against Field because Field's going to be bigger. Fight goes up against the cage push, okay? Field's going to be bigger. Same problem. Now, in the striking department, yeah, okay, maybe Cummins can start landing some good shots, but you're getting hit by somebody bigger, sometimes that changes the tide. So I do think just the size is going to play enough of a role for Field because she's not bad. Don't get me wrong. Field's not bad. I'm not saying that if they were the exact same weight that Cummins would just walk right through her, but if they were the same size, I think Cummins would probably get the win, but they're not, and that's why I'm going to take Field in this matchup. Let me know if you think I'm putting too much stock into the weight, but I would love to hear about it. And something interesting, this is about the only time it's an advantage to call a woman bigger. Usually that'll get you slapped. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next matchup here between Nick Browne and Mike Hamel. Now, for Hamel, he's 3-2 in his last 5, 4-1 on the Browne side. Something I want to point out about Hamel's record, 9-5. He's much better than that record suggests. He's actually fought a pretty high level of competition. So when you look at a guy like Hamel and you look at that 9-5, you instantly think, wow, 9-5, 13-2. The 13-2 guy should win no problem, right? Not so fast. So let's go ahead and break this one down a little bit so we can have better idea of what we're looking at here. So for Browne, he is the taller, longer fighter, 5'11 with a 72.5-inch reach, as opposed to 5'9 with a 68-inch reach. Now, Mike Hamel, things I like about Hamel. Forward pressure. He's got good wrestling. Some nasty grappling once it gets to the ground. He's got the cardio to do that for a full 15 minutes in this matchup. 15 minutes. And he does have power in his striking. Now, he is likely going to be the less skilled striker here. But he does have power. And when you see on the power, a guy that has bad striking defense, there's always the possibility of getting caught. And Nick Browne can be caught. Now, he does have a pretty good chin on him, so who knows what that'll result in. But Hamel does hit pretty hard. Now, for the wrestling, it was the Mota fight, Achilles Mota. Hamel didn't look as good in the wrestling, and that was a pretty darn recent fight. So I don't know what was up, if that was just a rough night for him. I don't know what was going on. But he didn't look as good in the wrestling in that matchup. So not really sure there. For Browne, yeah, his last time out, he did lose to a wrestler in Mamedov. That's who it was, Mamedov. And so could the wrestling be a path for victory for Hamel? Yeah, absolutely it could. Now, on the Browne side, he's a fast starter who's going to come out with an aggressive striking style. He's very good at it. Comes forward with a lot of volume, throws some heat on his punches, does a good job in the striking. But, like I said, that striking defense is a bit of a problem for him. If the fight does go to the mat, he does have a decent-sized toolbox in his arsenal for submissions. And he's pretty good at the grappling, but obviously he is more of a striker, and the striking is there where he's going to have the biggest advantage. So, Striking advantage for Browne, grappling and wrestling for Hamel. Usually, I lean the grappler or the wrestler. I usually lean the wrestler, let's put it that way. Wrestlers typically end up winning fights because they dictate where the fight takes place. And when I saw this matchup, initially my lean was Mike Hamel. But then, I got to thinking, and I said, okay, Browne did all right against Monvalvo. Hamel didn't look good in that Moda fight, and it just, in the grappling. He looked, in the wrestling, I guess, particularly. He didn't look as good as he normally would, and I think that's making me lean just the slightest bit Browne. So I think I'm going to switch my pick here. Originally, like I said, I was on the Hamel side. I'm switching over to the Browne side. I think he's going to be able to get it done in the striking, do enough damage there, that when the fight does get to the mat, he can either A, hold on the rest of the round, get back to his feet in the next round, and do enough damage to then win the fight, or B, just be able to get back up because he's already worked pretty hard against Hamel. Hamel's hurt, and at that point, Browne can just work his way back to his feet after the takedown. So I'm going to lean Browne. Should be a tough matchup for him, though. Not mega confident in this one, but let me know what you guys think. A lot of people are picking Browne from what I hear. I understand why. The record is obviously a big reason why as well, but I do think Hamel's way better in his record. So let me know what you guys think. I'll see you in the next heavyweight division. We have Christian Edwards taking on Rakim Cleveland. Now, interesting here, I actually had a buddy of mine, Scott Huff, who fought Rakim Cleveland a couple of years ago back in 2021. So I had him help me out. I had him help me break down Cleveland's performance and kind of what he would have done, what Huff would have done differently, things like that. So we're going to go over that, but we're also going to kind of break this down from my tape study, my analysis there. But anyway, both of these guys, 3-2 in their last 5 fights, similar in the record, obviously. We'll start with Christian Edwards here. He's a bit bigger. He's going to be 6'5" with a 72.5-inch reach, or 78.5-inch reach, sorry. 78.5-inch reach as opposed to the 6'3", 76-inch reach of Cleveland. So obviously the height and reach is going to be on the Edwards side. He does use that length well. He is good at the range striking, particularly the kicks. Now, a lot of people, when they saw his striking come out originally, his ability to clinch, things like that, because he does have a good tight clinch, a lot of people compared him to Jon Jones originally. Now, he didn't live up to that, obviously. He's on a 2-fight skid right now, but to some better guys. Yeah, he didn't live up to the Jon Jones hype, but, I mean, you know, it's Jon Jones. He's kind of one of the best fighters of all time, so there's that. Anyway, when it comes to the grappling department, I would say Edwards is decent. I would say I almost want to give him a better rating than that, but he does struggle to get the fight to the grappling, and I think that plays a role in it. But the length that he has does help on the ground for wrapping up submissions, wrapping up control, things like that. Length is going to help, and he does use it pretty well on the mat. Now, for Cleveland, this is an interesting one because when I talked to Scott said, hey, the thing that he does very well, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not just going to read out my notes, is he said Rakim is patient. He said that he's very patient. He deals with discomfort while he's waiting for his window of opportunity, waiting for his opening. And he's got some pretty good power in those hands. So when he finds that window, boom, connect. And in fact, that's actually what he got Scott with. Now, Scott got dropped, TKO'd in the second round, okay? The first round, Scott won that round because what was he able to do? He was able to use his grappling. So he could struggle with high-level grapplers, and Scott is a very good grappler, don't get me wrong. But that's where guys compete. Cleveland is in the grappling. So this is interesting because how does this add up? How do we see this? How good is the grappling of Edwards? So anyway, Cleveland's going to stick to his basics. He's going to use his patience. He's going to wait, find his opportunity, and then try to land that shot. And when he does land that shot, he's probably going to drop somebody. And if he does land that shot, Edwards is going to be in trouble. But here's the thing. So when I talked to Scott said, you know, what I would have done differently. First off, what happened is Scott said in his own words, he got caught when he was trying to Frankenstein in to get into the clinch. More likely than not, is what he was trying to do is get into the clinch. But he got caught when he was trying to Frankenstein in, get to the clinch, and get the fight to the mat. Because in the first round, he had some pretty good success on the ground against a guy like Cleveland. But Cleveland's patient, so on the bottom while he's there, he didn't do anything too reckless in order to get himself in trouble or caught. So now, when I asked Scott, I said, well, what would you have done differently? He said, I would have shot a takedown right away. I would have, instead of coming through with the, Frankenstein, come forward and try to get the clinch first, I would have just, instead of exchanging some hands, I would have shot a takedown right away. So obviously he was having success on the mat. So rightfully so. He said some other things as well. I've got those up on the Patreon. I'll put the whole quote up there, all the quotes up there if you want. But yeah. Anyway, from that analysis, what I've gathered from a guy who actually fought Cleveland is that if Cleveland connects on Edwards, he's probably going to drop him. However, if Edwards is able to use this length very well on the outside, and then until he gets into the clinch, bring it down to the mat, he might be able to bank some rounds or get the win over Cleveland, especially with the ground and pound. I think that's what's going to happen here. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup where we're going to see Cleveland being patient, kind of waiting to pick a spot, possibly catch Edwards on the way in, but also, if he doesn't, I think Edwards is going to be able to get into the clinch, similar to what my buddy Scott was able to do, work his clinch to either to the cage or to the trip and be able to get on top. And if he gets on top, I do think Edwards is going to be able to put Cleveland away. He has been put away a couple of times in his recent fights. So I'm going to lean Christian Edwards, but I'm not confident because Edwards is on that 2-fight skid, and I don't know where his confidence is at, a guy that's young in his career. So that's where I am. Probably a longer breakdown than needed, but, I had my buddy to help me out on this one, so it was kind of an interesting one for me to break down just from getting to watch that fight again as well as some others. So anyway, let me know what you guys have. I'm not super confident in this one. If you are, I'd love to hear about it, and I'll see you next fight. First of 2 women's featherweight matchups here. We have 3-0 Sara Collins taking on Pam Sorenson, who's 2-3 in her last 5, but she's a grizzled veteran of the sport. She's been there, she's done that, and she is 37. So I'm not sure how old Sara Collins is. For whatever reason, I didn't have it in my notes. She's much younger than 37, though, so let's put it that way. So she's the young up-and-comer with only 3 fights under her belt as a professional, taking on Pam Sorenson, who's been around the block a few times. Now, in this one here, I've already marked it out for you guys. Decent Muay Thai, decent wrestling offensively, and I do think if this stays in a striking matchup, Pam Sorenson's going to pick apart Sara Collins pretty easily. However, Pam Sorenson, she can be controlled on the mat and she can be controlled against the cage. Sara Collins, she has a judo background. She controls people against the cage, and she's also good from top control, particularly from the scarf hold position. So she happens to have 2 of the skills that are pretty good about beating somebody who gets controlled in those areas. So for me, I think just the age is starting to catch up with Sorenson a little bit. Hate to say it, but it's what happens. We're all aging, and if you're not, you're dying, or you've already died. So for Sorenson, I just think she's past that point in her career where she's not in her prime anymore. She is 2-3 in her last 5 for a reason. Yes, she's fought some of the tougher competition, but I think Sara Collins has a particular set of skills. Wow, that sounds weird to say. That she has these set of skills that she can use to beat someone like Pam Sorenson. So I'm going to lean Sara Collins here. However, if this ends up being a striking matchup, I think Pam Sorenson's going to make us all look silly if we're picking the younger fighter here. But I'm going to take Sara Collins. Not a ton of confidence. Let me know what you have, and I'll see you next time. Big-time lightweight matchup here between Vladimir Tokov and Lance Gibson Jr. For Lance Gibson Jr., he is 5-0 in his last 5 because he's 7-0 overall. We're looking at 3-2 for Tokov in his last 5. He does have 7 wins as well, but those 2 losses are in there. Now, for Tokov, we're going to start with him. He is a good wrestler. Control is kind of where it's at for him. He's going to want to win some minutes with that control. He will catch your kicks and take you down with those. Also has some good traditional takedowns of his own, but the kick, what he likes to do is when you throw your kick, he likes to throw an overhand, grab your leg at the same time, try to land the overhand as he's stepping into the takedown. It's a good move from a lot of wrestlers. Tokov just happens to be particularly good at it. Now, his submission defense is so-so, and the reason I say that is, yes, nothing has caught him yet. He's escaped every time. But he puts himself in position that in his only 9 fights that he has, he's been in a lot of triangles, a lot of guillotines, and I don't think guillotines are usually that good of a move. Yes, it works sometimes. Usually it's not. So usually those aren't something to worry about, but the triangles can be. A couple of arm bars, things like that. He's found himself in submissions, and yes, he's been able to get out so far, but you can only do that so many times before somebody's good enough to catch you. So that is something that I question about is his submission defense. A lot of times he relies too much on being able to get out of the submission once it's already in. Now, he does have decent striking as well. The head kick is particularly good, but the problem is he does get backed up, and that is not something you want to see out of a striker, so he will get backed up. He can throw nice clean straights, but that head kick is probably his best thing from the striking department. Now, for Lance Gibson here. Now, for Gibson, he's good in the jiu-jitsu department. He's very active off his back, but the problem is occasionally he'll sit there too long from his back trying to play that jiu-jitsu game. And then when you got somebody over here like Tokov with the control, that's not what you want to see from Gibson. Now, the good news is He has good striking and good volume. The striking it's not his best asset. I do think the grappling is better for him, but he does have pretty good striking. The volume is there, and that kind of makes up for any deficiencies in his striking is the volume. He does have decent wrestling. The control, okay, this is one of my favorite things, because his ground and pound and control, there was a fight, God, I can't remember who it was against, blanking on this one, but he used the knee on face position. Now, my coach always used to tell me this. He's like, yeah, you can't knee your opponent in the head when they're on the ground, right? But you can set your knee on their face, and you can just put your weight on it. And that's not against the rules, because you can use it as long as you don't knee them in the head, you can set it there and rest it on them and start landing ground and pound. And he did that at one of his Bellator fights, and golly, that was one of my favorite things to see. Not enough people use the knee on face position. It's nasty, and you know what? If they start to scramble, guess what? You just pivot really hard and turn and you tear some face. It's a great move. Technically, it's allowed. At least, as far as I know, it's allowed everywhere, but yeah. Love it. So that was some of the highlight that I really liked about Lance Gibson here. So one other thing is he's not rattled when he's down on the rounds. Now, this could be a negative as well, because he may not have that sense of urgency to come back and get the win, but he has lost a round in the past and then come back and got the victory. So I do like that he's not going to get rattled, especially because he's probably going to get controlled at times in this matchup. So I do like that out of Lance Gibson here. And another thing that is interesting is right here. We've got this, and I use a different color so you can see that better. The submission defense versus a guy that's active off his back stays here too long in the control. This is a tough one. I have gone back and forth on this pick a couple of times. I do think I'm going to side with Lance Gibson Jr., and the reason why is because I've seen Tokov get caught in too many triangles and just kind of fight his way out. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that forever. And I think somewhere in this matchup, he's going to get caught in, I'm going to say a triangle, but it could be something else. But I'm going to say a triangle, and he's not going to be able to get out in time. He's either going to go to sleep or be forced to tap out. And I do think Lance Gibson's going to be able to get the submission here. Probably later in the fight, end of the second, third round maybe. I'm leaning Lance Gibson by submission here. And I just, like I said, I think that Tokov might get out of a couple, but I think at some point he's going to get caught in submission and not be able to get out. So leaning Lance Gibson. Let me know who you have. I wouldn't doubt doubt you if you said Tokov was going to win this one. I'd say, hey, you might be right. This is a close one. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the featherweight matchup here between Lucas Brennan and Josh San Diego. Now, for all you old timers like me, do you remember Carmen San Diego? I just thought of that when I was writing his name up there. I don't know. Where in the world is she anyway? Back to this fight here. So 5-0 on the Brennan side in his last 5. Obviously, he's undefeated overall. 2-3 for San Diego. In this one here, so first off, I was not super high on Lucas Brennan at first. Some of his earlier matchups, I thought, he's pretty much exclusively a grappler. He still tends to be a grappler. That's what he does. Most of his wins are going to be by submission. I believe 5 of his 7 are by submission. Does have 1 ground and pound, whatever, and 1 decision. But 5 of his 7 are submissions because that's what he's seeking, okay? But I wasn't big on him at first because I thought, okay, these grapplers, a lot of times if that's all they have, it's different if it's a wrestler. Wrestlers can get by on just wrestling. If you just have the jiu-jitsu and just have the grappling once the fight gets to the mat, sometimes you struggle to get it there. Lucas Brennan has proved me wrong. He has been able to do that in just about every fight so far, and it's obviously worked out very well for him. Actually, in every fight so far, it's worked out well for him. So on the other side, though, Josh San Diego, he's a bit older, 38 years old. He's had a pretty long layoff. It looks like Bellator's kind of bringing him in. Hey, man, you've been off for a long time. Maybe let's come in here and get beat by this up-and-comer. That's what it looks like. But don't count him out yet because he does have decent striking with some volume. If he can keep this fight, aggressive pressure right down the middle, he can have some success early on against a guy like Brennan. But he does get reckless at times, and I think that's when it's going to end up on the mat. Now, he's not lost down there. Good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the San Diego side. He's got the dog in him a little bit. I think he can still come after it. But the problem is the layoff has been there. He is getting quite a bit older, and he's fighting a very tough, young, up-and-coming prospect, only 22 years of age, with some very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And at his age, that's pretty good. He has seemed to develop a pretty good body lock takedown and some trips as the alternative. If the body lock's not working, he can flip that foot in there, which you obviously just didn't see me do because the camera's way up here. But hit the trip, get the guy to the mat, and he's going to start looking for that choke right away. The Anaconda seems to be his favorite choke, but he's got some other options as well. And if it's not coming right away, he's going to mix in the ground and pound to get it set up. So for me, I do think Lucas Brennan's going to get this one done. San Diego could start off pretty hard in this matchup and catch Brennan with something surprising. But I think Brennan's going to be able to power through it and be able to get through the rest of that initial flurry and then be able to start working his grappling. And I think once it hits the mat, Brennan should be smooth sailing from there. He's just very, very good in the grappling department. So for me, Brennan's a pick. Let me know who you have. Next, we have Joey Davis taking on Jeff Creighton in the welterweight division. Davis obviously is undefeated, 5-0 in his last 5, 8-0 overall. Taking on the 3-1-1 draw for Creighton. Now for Creighton, durable fighter. In his regional scene fights that I was watching coming into this, the dude can take a shot and just keep coming forward. He does have decent striking of his own. He has good movement with his feet, sticks the jab out, moves, whatever. He's got pretty good movement. But the forward pressure is, I think, what helps make that striking look pretty good anyway. So his wrestling is actually where he's best, though. He does have good wrestling. I believe I could be wrong, but I believe he was state high school wrestler or something like that. But pretty good control. I believe one of the commentators was mentioning that in one of the regional fights I was watching. But he's got good top control when he gets there and can work the ground and pound from there. But the problem is he's going up against a guy in Davis who, decent striking of his own, but has quite a bit of power in the hands. Problem is he doesn't throw the prettiest combination sometimes. He usually sticks with single shots, 1s and 2s maybe. But he does have a quick side kick that kind of is a change of pace. The way he snaps it up, it doesn't deal a ton of damage, but it'll push you back, throw you off where you're at, and give him that space that he needs to do what he wants to do. But he also is a very high-level wrestler. I believe, 4-time Division II national champion? I could be wrong about that. I believe it was 4 times. Division II national champion. His takedowns are very powerful, explosive, and that's just because he's an explosive, athletic human being. The way that he runs through guys with those takedowns, I think, is going to be too much for Creighton here. I do think Joey Davis is going to get the win. I don't think that goes with too much controversy there. But Creighton's tough. Dude's a dog, so maybe he can hang in there a little bit longer than a lot of us are thinking. I do think Davis is going to get the win, though. Let me know what you think. Let's go ahead and move on to the next. Really looking forward to this fight here at the lightweight division. We have Justin Montalvo taking on Archie Colgan. Both guys are undefeated, and this one was an interesting one for me to break down. We know Archie Colgan is going to be very fun to watch. All of his fights so far have been. But he's coming in as the undersized fighter. He's 5'9" with a 69.5-inch reach, as opposed to the 6-foot-tall, 73.5-inch reach of Montalvo. Now, for Colgan, he's probably going to be the more muscular guy. In fact, I know that he's going to be the more muscular guy. He's a very strong wrestler with very powerful takedowns. The guy has very fast, powerful hands. Sometimes he can get stuck in throwing those single shots. In fact, most of the time he's throwing single shots. But the dude's a savage all around. And I assumed that the odds would be like minus 1,000 on Colgan, but they're not. Why is that? Well, when you look at Montalvo, you look at the guy and you think, okay, he can't be nearly as good as this dude. Colgan's a beast. But when you watch him fight, you start to notice, okay, this guy's better than I initially thought. He has good striking, good combinations. He works volume very well, takes his punches down to the body. And the thing is, he's very accurate. And it actually makes his punches seem like they're hitting way harder than they are because he's not throwing a lot in these punches. Some of them are even just like touches. But when he's putting them right where they need to be, he's very accurate, which makes his punches seem very powerful. He's not winding up. He's just got good form, good accuracy, and puts those shots right where they need to be. So his striking is very good. He's a much better striker out of the two. The power is going to be on the Colgan side, obviously. The guy hits like a truck. But Montalvo is the much more accurate striker, and he is the better technical striker. The problem is he does tend to allow the opponent to dictate where the fight's taking place. His opponent, Colgan in this case, definitely going to dictate where this fight takes place because that's just what he does. But Montalvo is going to let you back him up. He's going to start working his strikes backwards. If you shoot the takedown, cool, no big deal. He's going to start working for sweeps, working to get back up. But he's not the one that's moving forward typically and walking down his opponent. And I think a lot of that's because he's a taller, more slender fella, and that's okay. That's just his body type. That's what it is. But sometimes he lets the opponent dictate the fight. So he can be taken down, but he's worked back to his feet very well so far in all the fights that I saw. He does have decent grappling, and the sweeps are where it's at. Because when he is on bottom, he does have a good sweep and to get right back on top, and typically he's going to try and get back into that striking range. So the reason the odds aren't so crazy is because Montalvo is a darn good striker. However, all that said, I think Colgan's going to go in there and wrestle and just pick Montalvo up, slam him to the mat a handful of times, and Montalvo's not going to be able to get up every single time. And the time that Colgan's able to hold him down, he's going to land some heavy, heavy shots and probably get the win. So I'm picking Colgan here just because this dude's an absolute savage. And I'm a big Colgan fan, if you cannot tell. So anyway, probably a closer fight than originally thought. And a lot of people, when they see Archie Colgan, they say, hammer that line, let's go. I'm one of those guys. But this one's worth doing some tape study on. So Colgan's a pick. Let me know what you have, and I'll see you in the next fight. Before we get into this fight, if you've made it this far and you're enjoying yourself, why don't you go ahead and toss a like for me on this video? I do appreciate it very much. It goes a long way for getting the algorithm to pick up my videos, so thank you. Let's get into this fight here. We have Adam Piccolotti taking on Mandel Nallo, also known as Rat Garbage, which is my favorite nickname or fighter name or whatever in all of Bellator. Gotta love Rat Garbage. But this is in the lightweight division. For Nallo, he's coming in 2-2-1, that one being a no contest in his last 5, 2-3 on the Piccolotti side. So similar records, basically about the same, whatever. Interesting matchup, though. And this is one of those tough ones to predict, like I was talking about at the beginning. This is one of those really tough matchups to predict because I do think in the grappling department, Piccolotti is better. Now, don't get me wrong, Nallo has good grappling, but Piccolotti's real good in the grappling. He does often go for submission over position, which can be hit or miss. Sometimes that's a good thing because you get submission, but you can also give up the position, which can be rough. But the good news is for Piccolotti here, we're going to go and make the line there. He's also good at scrambles. So if he does lose that position, he's good at getting back to that position or a similar advantageous position. So he is good at that, but he is submission over position, so he could lose a spot by doing that. He is a submission specialist, which is good because, well, that's how you get those finishes in there, and he'll set them up a lot of times with some strong ground and pound. So I do like Piccolotti once he gets to the mat. The problem is sometimes he does shoot from range in order to get it to the mat because he knows that's his best spot. Now, he does have decent combinations on the feet. He is okay with the striking. It's not terrible by any means, but obviously he's more of a grappler. That is where he's going to find the most success in most of his matchups. Now, he's going against a guy named Mandel Nallo, also known as Rat Garbage, as we mentioned, who is also pretty good at grappling, and he's a back taker. However, here's the problem. He hasn't really used his grappling as his primary offense, if you will, for the longest time. Like early in his career, he was really into the grappling, doing that, but then he started to kind of fall in love with his hands, as a lot of grapplers do as they get better at striking. And, well, for good reason, because Nallo has some serious KO power. If he hits you, you're dropping most of the time. He does work in combination as well, so it's not like he's just throwing one shot and hoping for the best. So he's good there. He's got good movement on his feet. But seriously, that KO power is the biggest upside for him. And honestly, that is why I'm taking Rat Garbage in this matchup. I do think he's going to be able to catch Piccolotti over the course of 3 rounds. I think that power is going to be there, whether he gets the knockout or if it gets to the mat with a hurt Piccolotti. I do think he's going to be able to get it done. Maybe Piccolotti survives, but you can only get dropped so many times before the judges say, you know what, he's losing these rounds, even if he is getting a lot of control time, even if he is fishing for submissions. He got dropped quite a few times, and I think Nallo's going to be able to connect on a few, especially if we see a shot from long range. That's just where I'm at. Let me know where you're at. I'd love to hear it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next fight. Heavyweight with a couple of up-and-coming prospects. We have Luke Traynor taking on Sullivan Cauley. Now, this is actually a fight that I've been waiting all week to see if it gets canceled because I just can't imagine why Bellator's putting these two guys together at this point in their career because I figured they'd be trying to build both of these guys up. But Luke Traynor, 4-1 in the last 5, obviously undefeated. Cauley over here. It's an interesting matchup. When you look at this one, obviously Traynor is the much bigger guy. He's 6'6" with an 81-inch reach, so he's a very large human being. 6'3" with a 74.5-inch reach for the Cauley side. He's also a large human being, but I mean, you can't really beat that 6'6". So when you look at this one, though, skill for skill, you say Traynor probably has the more technical abilities. And you'd be right because the grappling is very good on the Traynor side. He does have those long limbs that he can help use to control his opponents as well as lock up submissions. And he's got them choking arms, as you've heard me say before. He's got the choking arms. And the thing is, if this fight gets to the mat and Traynor gets on top of Cauley, he's got a really good shot here. However, if he ends up on the bottom, we'll get to that in a minute, but the reverse is true. Now, in the striking, decent striking out of Traynor. He's got some power to him, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's a big guy, but he uses his range well, kind of picks his spots from the outside and does a good job at that. But he's fighting a guy in Sullivan Cauley who, power, speed, aggression, that's what he's doing. He's going forward and he's going to try and wreck your day. The problem is he sometimes does rely on being the more physical fighter, which could be a problem, especially because he's the smaller guy in this matchup. Now, he's the denser fighter, the more dense body type that is, but he's going to be shorter. He's going to have to go against a guy that can reach him before he can reach them, so there is that. But if he does get on top, the dudes get decent top pressure, and that ground and pound is some of the heaviest I've seen. So this is an interesting matchup and a tough one to break down, or at least a tough one to pick a side for. And I definitely don't recommend betting this one because for me, this is the fight. Definitely going to kick my feet up on the coffee table, crack open a nice cold root beer, probably get a couple of swigs in before somebody gets to finish, and I won't get to finish my root beer, but I will probably lean Cauley because I think he's going to be able to land a devastating shot at some point, and the dude is just an animal when he hits you, and I do think that if he can get Trainer to the ground and get on top, it's going to be a rough night for Trainer for that little bit of time that it's going to last, but there's a world where Trainer wins. He is the more technical fighter, but I think at this point, the physicality of Cauley is going to get the win. So I'm leaning Cauley, not confident. I'm going to start cracking open root beers here. I'll see you guys in the next fight. Let me know who you got. The welterweight division, Rustam Khabilov making his return to MMA, taking on Jaleel Willis. Now for Willis, he's 3-2 in his last 5, 4-1 on the Khabilov side. Khabilov, 36 years old, so he's a bit older fighter here, and coming off of a long layoff of nearly 4 years, that can be an issue, but he's also the shorter fighter here. He is 5'8" with a 73-inch reach, as opposed to the 31-year-old in Willis, who is 5'11" with a 74.5-inch reach. Now, the reach advantage, the height advantage, they're not that big of a difference, but they're there, so we're pointing them out a little bit. Now, the layoff, that is the thing that we got to wonder about Khabilov here, because the dude was very, very talented before this layoff. Had a few hiccups along the way. Obviously, he's 24-4, so he's had a few hiccups, but nothing crazy. A lot of those losses are coming to higher level guys over in the UFC, which is where most of Khabilov's recent fights have taken place. The dude has solid wrestling. His top control is what's going to win him the match. He's going to use that top control to win minutes, and that's what he does. He's got decent ground and pound from there. Just kind of stays safe more so and just works his way through the matchup that way. Now, striking, decent. He likes to strike in flurries to get in close and then use that wrestling to get you to the mat. Realistically, this is what he's trying to do right here. That wrestling is what he's trying to do, and it works well for him when it does. Now, on the other side, we have Jaleel Willis, who I was very down on before his last fight against Crutchmer. I had Crutchmer winning that fight. Willis just didn't look good in a couple of fights before that. I thought, maybe Willis just isn't the prospect we thought he was. He looked really good against Crutchmer. So I stand corrected. I can admit when I was wrong. He showed some serious improvement. So good wrestling. He still can be held on his back, but we didn't get to see that, or at least from what I know, we didn't get to see that in the Crutchmer fight because he just kept stuffing those takedowns. He stuffed a lot of Crutchmer's takedowns, and Crutchmer has good wrestling. Wrestled at, Oklahoma State, I believe it was. Pretty darn high level here. So for him to be able to stuff those takedowns, that was very impressive to me. The one thing that I do want to mention, though, is, I feel like I've said Crutchmer 100 times, but when he had Willis up against the cage, Dan Miragliotta stepped in within seconds most times to break him back up. It was kind of odd how quickly he was breaking up these wrestling, these takedown attempts for Willis, in the favor of Willis. So I don't really know. Miragliotta just had a real quick trigger that night, so that could have played a role. But either way, Willis looked pretty good, okay? The boxing showed some serious improvement there. I started seeing some serious improvement. I started seeing 3-punch combos out of Willis. I started seeing him mix in body shots with the boxing. He looked like a different fighter in that matchup. And because of that head of steam coming in, him looking so much better in his last matchup, I'm going to take him to beat Khabilov in this matchup, coming off a guy who's coming off of a nearly 4-year layoff. A guy who, he's a talented fighter, but he's going to need to get the top control. He's going to need to win the minutes. And who knows, maybe Willis will luck out and Miragliotta's the ref again, and he'll be like, yep, get back to your feet, let's go. And if that's the case, I think Willis is going to get the win. Now, I'm not mega confident in that, but refer to the Patreon, patreon.com/138MMA, if you'd like to see my picks with confidence ratings. I'm leaning Willis here, so let me know who you have, and let's go to the matchup here between a couple of guys who are just outside of the title picture. We have John Salter taking on Aaron Jeffrey. Now for Jeffrey, 4-1 in the last 5, 3-2 on the Salter side. Something interesting about this matchup here is Aaron Jeffrey has 3 losses, all to 3 very high-level current UFC fighters. And 2 of those losses were both on the Contender Series against Brennan Allen and Caio Borralho. So if it wasn't for those 2 guys being his opponent on the Contender Series, Aaron Jeffrey likely would be in the UFC. But he did lose those, and now we find him over here in Bellator, competing at a high level against a guy named John Salter, who has been there, done that, and has wins over some high-level UFC guys in his own right. So for John Salter, he is a bit older, though. The guy's 38 years old. He still has his cardio. That is something that he still has. He's coming off a couple of losses, but those are to Gegard Mousasi and Johnny Eblen, the current champion. So for Salter, he's still competing at a very high level. Yeah, he lost to Eblen. Not a big deal. Yeah, he lost to Mousasi. Not a big deal. These are guys that, yeah, you're going to lose to sometimes. Somebody's got to lose when you get into the cage. And Salter's still been able to beat some of the guys that are also towards the top of the division. So this is a big test for Jeffrey here. We'll see if he's able to make his way towards the top of the middleweight division in Bellator. The cardio, like I mentioned, it's still there for Salter, but he's got very high-level grappling. His jiu-jitsu, super high level. He is quick to snatch up submissions, particularly the rear naked choke, and he's got a very tight squeeze once he does. He's also very good at reversing the position. If he ends up on the bottom, he can flip to the top, no problem. He likes to get that leg in there and flip you over without you even knowing what hit you. So he's very talented on the mat. That is something we know. Now, to get the fight to the mat, he does have a very nice single leg takedown. Gets in deep on the single, pulls back, drops you to the mat. Once he gets on top, that top pressure is tough to deal with. For Jeffrey, though, the dude's very durable. He's got a lot of pressure coming forward, and the cardio's there to match. So he's got that. With the wrestling, he's got his own wrestling in his back pocket here. His takedown defense, pretty darn good. He also has a good cage push. He likes to shove guys up against the cage. That's where he beat Andre Petrovsky. He was able to get him up against the cage, work him over well from that position, and then he can kind of just grind on his opponents, whether he's on the mat or up against the cage. He just has an abrasive style in his grappling. Now, in the striking department, I do think Jeffrey has the advantage here because Salter is more or less grappler, okay? Jeffrey's a little more well-rounded. He does have a nice 3-2 combo, that hook to the cross there. He does have a nice 3-2 combo that he likes to come forward with. His knees are also good, either from range or in the clinch. And for me, I do think that if Jeffrey's able to keep this fight on the feet, he's going to have an advantage. But if this fight gets to the mat, Salter might have an edge. So this is a close one. I don't think Jeffrey's bad on the ground. I do think he's got a really good shot at keeping up with Salter, but Salter is probably going to be the better grappler. In the matchup, though, I do think Jeffrey's going to be hard enough to take down that he's going to be able to land enough on the feet. So I'm going to lean with the younger fighter in Aaron Jeffrey to get this one done. But guys, I hope you still got some of your root beers left because this is a good matchup to kick your feet up on the coffee table and crack open a cold root beer and just enjoy because this is going to be a fun matchup for as long as it lasts. I'm leaning Jeffrey. Let me know what you have, and I'll see you in the next fight. We find ourselves in the co-main event, and if you're still here, still having a good time, do me a favor. Go ahead and hit that like button as hard as you can. I appreciate it so very much. And if you're enjoying yourself, maybe subscribe to this channel because you're going to find more of my content as we continue to do cards. Bellator, UFC, Dana White's Contender Series. We're doing it all. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can find me right there in your subscriptions tab. And let's go ahead and break down this co-main event. So, Kat Zingano in the featherweight division is taking on Leah McCourt. An interesting matchup here because we got a pretty big age gap, 10 years to be exact. Both ladies are 4-1 in their last 5 fights. So, let's start with the Zingano side. She is 40 years old, so she's getting up there in age, but she's shown pretty good skills in her recent fights. Obviously, she's 4-1, so that's a good sign. She has very solid wrestling. That is going to be her best path to victory in most fights. She's going to be able to work her wrestling with those solid takedown entries. She gets nice and low, shoots that shoulder into the gut, picks her opponent up, wraps both legs, and sets them down very hard. So the takedown is there, and once she gets on top, she's a very grinding top pressure. She works the ground and pound. She's hurting you, causing damage with every movement that she can. She's going to work knees on the ground even, just to the body. She's going to, run that arm across your face every moment that she can and just kind of cut you up with her elbows. Whatever she's got to do to cause as much friction and damage as she can from the top. Now, good jiu-jitsu as well. She's also quick to the sub, so whether she's trying to, lock up an armbar, go for a choke, whatever she's got to do, she's quick on that attack. Now, she can strike. I didn't put it up here. She can strike, but definitely the wrestling and jiu-jitsu is going to be her best bet here. Now, on the Leah McCourt side, similar. She's a little more of an all-arounder, but similar in the fact that she has a particular area that's her best spot, and that's in the cage push, which is a strange thing to see that that's somebody's best spot, but that is. Her cage push is her best spot because what's she going to do? She's going to win minutes up against the cage. She's going to hold a fighter there, work him over with some shots, but she has very nice throws from that cage. She's got that headlock takeover. She's got the hip toss, whatever. She's got the slick trips that she can work in from that spot. As fighters use the cage to work back to their feet, guess what? She's putting you back up against the cage, and she's winning more minutes there. If it does get to the ground, she does have good grappling in her own right. And something that I noticed is she has my personal favorite, and I don't think it's arguable, but some people would argue, the best armbar escape. And that's hard to describe or show you on camera here. But when they get to your arm, instead of just sitting there like this and just burning yourself out, no, you let them start to pull it. And as soon as they do, you roll through, and as you roll through, you stack your opponent, and then you end up on top. Now, it has to be timed perfect. You have to make sure you're not going to get somebody that has the most nasty of arm bars that can just pinch your arm too tight and you can't roll. Usually you can roll. That's just, your arm is usually kind of roundish. It's not a box, it's not square, it's not rectangular. So you can usually roll some. Now, I'm not the world's greatest jiu-jitsu player, don't get me wrong, but that armbar escape works against people that are much better than I am, at least, for me, but she uses it, and that's the thing that I think is going to help her a lot. And this is that shows her grappling skill, is that she uses that, and she's used it multiple times in her matchups to save her arm from getting snapped. So I do like her grappling. The armbar escape is what kind of cued me into that she's a little bit better than people are giving her credit for in the grappling. Now the striking, not her best bet, not her best area of expertise per se, but she does have good volume to match up with that, and she's decent offensively. It's just defensively where she's lacking. She does have great cardio, though. I will say the cardio advantage is probably going to McCourt in this matchup. The aging Zingano, yeah, if she's on top and she's landing a ground and pound, Zingano is going to have a good shot of outlasting McCourt here. But if this matchup ends up being a grinding back and forth in the grappling, some striking here and there, I think McCourt's going to have the better cardio. So for me, this matchup comes down to a couple of factors. One, what stage is Kat Zingano at this point in her career? Where is she at as far as the level goes? Has she declined yet? Has she started declining at all? We've seen it in some fighters younger than her, and here she is at 40, but we've also seen fighters like Holly Holm who still look pretty darn good at 41. We just saw that last weekend in the UFC. So where is Kat Zingano right now in her career? For McCourt, how is she going to handle the veteran of Kat Zingano? Is she going to play into Kat's game plan, or is she going to try to implement her own by pushing Kat up against the cage, winning minutes, whether or not the crowd likes it or not? So for me, I'm going to slightly lean Leah McCourt because she's a massive underdog here, and I think she can get it done being the younger fighter, having the cardio, and I think she's just skilled enough in every position that she's going to be able to do all right. Now, I don't think she's a world beater by any means. I do think she's talented, don't get me wrong, and we've picked her before as an underdog, and she cashed for us in her last matchup, actually. So I'm going to lean McCourt here as, I think, like a plus 300 underdog. Not mega confident, don't bet everything you have on it, but I don't mind a small flyer there. I'm going to take McCourt. Let me know what you have, and I'll see you guys in a minute. We're at the main event of the evening. We have Daniel James taking on Marcelo Golm. And this is the last reminder from me to go ahead and like this video because I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate all of you staying tuned and checking out this main event. But let's break it down, shall we? We have Marcelo Golm, who is 4-1 in his last 5, taking on Daniel James, who's 4-1 in his last 5. Huge difference in age, 11 years, 41 for James, whereas 30 years old for Golm. For whatever reason, I thought Golm was a bit older than that. I feel like he's been around for a lot longer, but I guess he's only 30. He is 6'3" with a 75-inch reach, so he's going to be the smaller fighter against James, who is 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. Now, let's start on the James side. He does have decent boxing, and I say decent because really it's just his jab. The dude's got a nice jab, and he works behind that jab well. The rest of his punches are a bit wild, but there's power to them. They're not as technical. His jab looks good, though. I do like his jab. So if he can just crisp up the rest of his strikes to look like that jab, awesome. Guy's got it there. He does grind guys out against the cage, win some minutes there. He's got pretty good takedown defense. I ain't right up here, but that's the thing that he has. Grinding guys out up against the cage is something that he does very well. And also, he's got good cardio for a heavyweight. Most heavyweights have horrible cardio. He's got pretty good cardio. On the Golm side, He's got the youth, obviously, like I said. He's a very durable guy, and he does have good grappling. So if this fight gets to the mat, I do think Golm is going to have the better grappling. But he's hard to really get a gauge on. And let me break this down a little bit more for you. He's hard to get a gauge on because he has a lot of wins over quite a bit lower level competition, but his 3 losses are pretty darn high level competition. But he doesn't have a lot in between. He doesn't have a lot of mid-tier. A lot of pretty good guys, but not, whatever. He doesn't have a lot of those guys that you see and you're like, oh, okay, they're mid-tier. Where does he stack up against mid-tier guys? He's got a lot of guys on his record that you're like, man, that guy's a trash can. And not really a trash can, don't get me wrong. They're fighters that have stepped in there, and some of them have wins. But he's got a lot of guys that have massive losing records, 2-8 or something like that. I'm just picking that number. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but he's gone up against a lot of guys that have really low records, and then he's also gone up against guys that have really good records, like Sergey Pavlovich, for example. It's hard to get a good gauge on Marcelo Golm, and I'll tell you something that's got me leaning one way now. Davion Franklin is a guy that Marcelo Golm was fighting not too long ago. Now, for Franklin, he was winning most of that fight, and Golm ended up taking the victory. And I believe at the time Franklin was 5-0, so good record there. But Davion Franklin, big, powerful dude. He was wrecking Marcelo Golm, beating the brakes off him. He was gassed after the first round. In the second round, he's still super gassed, but beating up on Marcelo Golm. And I'm like, dude, this guy's barely breathing anymore. He's totally gassed beyond belief. But for whatever reason, he's still landing on Golm. Golm eventually got the win, but he had to wait till Franklin basically just fell over for pure exhaustion to be able to do so. And because of that, I'm going to lean Daniel James here. I do think he's still got it in him. He looked pretty darn good in his last matchup, which I picked against him like a doofus. So I picked against Daniel James. You can go back and look at that video if you want me to look like a doofus. That's fine. Go ahead and comment and tell me I'm a doofus. I don't mind. Daniel James got the win, proved me wrong, and showed me that he's a lot better than I thought he would be at 41 years of age against a guy who I thought was going to beat him. But I don't think that Marcelo Golm is going to beat Daniel James. I don't think Marcelo Golm is going to be able to get this fight to the mat because I think he's going to struggle to get James down. I think he's going to struggle at range because that reach advantage is gigantic. Was it 7 inches? 7 inches is a big deal. So for Daniel James, I think he's going to be able to get the win here. Let me know who you guys have, but I feel okay about Daniel James. I don't know what the odds are on this fight. I didn't see this one, but I feel like James is probably going to be the underdog. And if so, might be worth throwing a couple bucks on. Not sure, maybe lunch money, you know what I mean? Throw $5-10 on it, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. I look forward to seeing you guys in the comments. I look forward to hearing all of your picks and predictions. Find me over on Twitter. And lastly, go ahead and find me on patreon.com/138MMA if you would like all my picks with confidence, access to all of my notes, all the good stuff, everything that you could ever ask for. Check it out. It's all right there. And I'll see you guys next week.